the time.
We see dead people. Everyone, and welcome to the Medium Next Door, and my name is Bonnie Page, and I'm so happy today to have a guest with me, and his name is Brant, and he's called the Evidential Medium. Brant, thank you for being here today. I'm so happy to have you.
I'm excited to be here, Bonnie. Thanks for having me.
And so I'm going to leave it on Brant a little bit to start off the show today, and I'm going to have him tell you a little bit about himself and how it was growing up and knowing that you had this gift, Brant. So go ahead and start people off.
Sure. Well, I think people kind of get an idea that everybody, or some people actually start out and say, oh, I want to be a medium when I grow up. And that was never really on my radar. I was always intuitive as a kid. But, if you'd pick up the phone and, hey, Martha, how are you? It would pick up the phone before it rang, you'd know who it was. So I was always in tune with that, but it was only with the loss of my mother that the volume was just really turned up in that regard. It's been a growth process for me. It's not something that I ever said I was setting out to do, but I do feel like it was a calling. And my first grade teacher, who's a nun, we're still friends of the family, we still keep in touch with her. I had a conversation with her towards my mom's passing. And I said, I've got a calling, I just don't know what it is. Because I knew I wasn't going to be a priest or going into that, but I always knew there was something else for me. So that's really what started me on my path for this.
So we know a lot of times that this gift is inherited down to us,
yes,
as mine was from my mother to my grandmother, from my great-grandmother. And then, growing up, it starts in very young with us knowing that there's something that's a little bit different, or we can see things, or we can hear things. Yep. And sometimes with the the passing of your mom, it just opened up your gift, and that, yes, can happen also because and my mother also is in heaven, so I kid around with Brant that our moms are up there. Look at them guys, and that's probably true. But
yeah, they're probably friends.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I was little, I always tell the story about how I was 4 or 5, and I'd be walking around our house, and I could see people walking around. And I got so good at it, I'd be going into the next room, and I'd kind of take a peek before I got there, saying to myself, oh, I wonder who's going to be in there. Right. But my mom was still with me then, and she would just say, oh, Bonnie, that's just so-and-so, or that's just one of your guides. And she took all the fear away. But, Brant, I have to ask you, because I slept with a full light on until I was 13 years old. I mean, really, I could only sleep when I could hear my dad snoring down the hall.
Yep.
Full light on, just because there was so many feelings of spirits being near me. Not, yep, that I was afraid. Yep. Well, maybe I was a little when I was little.
It's because we don't know. We don't know what's going on some of the times.
It was a feeling.
Right.
And was that like that with you at all?
When I look back, and this is, I now knowing now what I know. Back then, did I see spirits? Apparently I was. I didn't quite realize that. I used to see what I would call shadow people and not realizing it was spirit. A lot of times when I went to bed, I would hear voices or I'd feel them, and I was just like, there's something here, but I don't know what it is. And I used to literally envelop myself in a bubble or a protective shield, like a rotating shield. And I always did that as a kid. not realizing what was going on.
And just think, you knew how to do that.
I knew how to do
just
that.
Putting yourself in that protective God's white light bubble type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't bad spirits, or it wasn't anything of negative. It was just
The feeling of them being close.
of somebody, or there's someone else here. And a lot of times I used to have a fish tank, so the hum like would drown out the noise. And even like now, like I go to bed, I have a white noise machine, just because if it's too quiet, I do hear the whispers in the night.
You're going to start picking up
I
things.
do, right.
So I don't usually tell anyone this, but I'll share this little secret about myself. When I was little, I never could play with dolls. I swore they were going to get up and walk around in the end of the night, open their eyes. I don't know. I played with my cat. I dressed up my cat. If anybody brought me a doll for a gift, bought me a doll for a gift or whatever, I would stick it in my mother's room at night. Still never wanting to look at dolls.
Really?
Yeah. So I think just the feeling of spirit, and then feeling that, maybe they can do different things. So yeah, not comfortable with dolls still. So my little secret to be shared.
See, I always used to personify my stuffed animals. Like I always felt like there was something attached, not attached to them, but they were more alive. And I'm wondering now that after you mentioned, I'm like, I wonder if there was a spirit in there.
Yeah, and I had to give them all to my mother because she could watch them at night.
Right, right.
So Brant, I want to talk a little bit today about why we do this work as mediums, because Halloween's coming up, and it brings the big ghostly, scary stuff, and we can even kind of get caught up a little bit in it, people wanting readings because it's around Halloween.
Right.
But I know that you and I do this work for, year round. And that's not why we do the work.
Right.
So why don't you start and tell people how you feel about being a medium?
As I said before, Bonnie, like it's a calling, and I really feel a heavy responsibility to be able to do that. And when I do have a client, I am very passionate about wanting to give them the best reading that I can. I always said it's a partnership, because spirit can't do it without us, and we certainly can't do it without spirit. And when our clients are in a lot of pain, you want to make sure that they understand that even after we die, there's still a whole other life on the other side. Just because they're not here in a physical body doesn't mean that they're gone.
Right.
And if Uncle Bill thought he was funny here on Earth, well, guess what? When he's in heaven, he still thinks he's funny over there.
And he probably is. I laugh with them all the time.
Right. Their personality, it doesn't go away. And I try to get my clients to understand that they're okay. I mean, I'm sure you've had the experience, like if my mom died of cancer, and I don't remember what your mom passed of.
She had congestive heart failure.
But that's gone.
Right,
It's gone.
absolutely. They come through, and truthfully, Brant, I see my mom. She helps me give messages now, and she'll come like right in front of my face, and she's like 35 years old, and I'm like, Mom, now you're younger than me. And she's like, I'm not going back. And I'm like, and she doesn't say it like that. I'm just kidding. But yeah, she's so young and beautiful, long hair. And I told her, I felt like she was beautiful when she was 88, right? But when we go to heaven, we get to go back to where we were feeling and looking our best.
Yep.
And so they do.
They do. They can change how their appearance is for the reader, so that if somebody's trying to describe them, so that they get a better idea, they have the capability of that, because it's like a memory, right? And it's atoms and energy, and they have the ability to just, I don't want to say manifest, but really reorganize their energy so that it changes a little bit. It's amazing. I'm always in awe when you get that wonderful piece of evidence that they actually showed you, and you're able to describe that. It's amazing. I'm really impressed by spirit.
And I love it a lot, because sometimes spirit will actually show me a picture, and sometimes they'll show me a picture of themselves when they were 6, and then when they were, in the peak of feeling really well, and then they'll give me a sneak of how they looked when they were older, towards, like the more of the ending stages of their life. And so you really get to go through a lifetime with someone in heaven, a spirit that's coming through to you.
Right.
You can really actually get a nice little bond with them. And so bringing in the evidence part, because I've been asked before, well, why do you guys feel like you need to give these little bits and pieces of evidence? I've been asked that before, and I'm like, well, that's how you're going to know who you have a link with. So
Right.
I'll have a client sitting there going, who cares if I know my dad sat in a recliner and liked to watch Jeopardy? Well, you know what? That's your piece of evidence so that you know that that's your dad coming through for you. My dad doesn't watch Jeopardy.
Right.
Right?
Right. Or if you said Wheel of Fortune, you'd never watched Wheel of Fortune.
Exactly. So the evidence is very important, but some people don't realize it sometimes when we're giving the
Right.
little things
Right.
to them. But you know, Spirit's doing that on purpose,
Right.
Because that creates a beautiful link for them.
Right.
You know, we know that we have their dad or their mom or their friend or whoever's in heaven for them.
Right. I also tell my clients, you know, they're still people. Just because they're not here in a physical
Exactly.
body, and just because they're now in spirit, if they weren't great for accounting when you were here, don't ask them for money or money ideas, because that's not going to help them.
It's true.
It's true.
It's
You know,
true.
they're still people, and sometimes, and I admit, you know, even as a medium, sometimes I forget that I'm working with another person. And just like working with another person, you know, you and I had a great rapport just when we first met.
Exactly, we did.
And that's
yeah.
one way a lot of our readings work too, because when you have that great rapport, that's when the most amazing mediumship and those messages actually happen. If you meet someone that you don't know normally or don't always get along with well, it's like having an awkward conversation. So how's the weather
It can.
today?
So some readings for us go smooth,
Yes.
and some I say are like pulling
Pulling
someone's teeth
Yeah.
out. And that, you know, and hopefully we don't have them very often,
Right.
because we really do try to blend with someone in heaven and with our client a little bit, so
Right.
that, you know. And so what I guess I wanted to get at is why I do this work is for healing work,
Yeah.
right? Because when we can give a message to someone that they need to hear, like I went and I found Brant really at a psychic fair. I said, I need to talk to my mom. And I can hear some things from my mom,
Yep.
but I still like to go to someone once in a while and have my mom come through,
Oh.
right? Because then it's none of my mind working, hey mom, you know.
And it's validating.
And Brant did that for me. Like I went and, you know, it took the third reading with someone to find Brant and to really get a reading from my mom.
Yeah.
And I want to tell you one little part about it because it's amazing. Because Brant and I didn't know each other at all. I just sat down in front of him and he started talking about my mom. And then he said, you have a son? And I'm like, yes, and I just have one son, Trevor. And he's grown. He's going to be 27. But he's like, she's giving him quarters, but not all the time, and only when he has a choice to make. And so my son Trevor was going through a little breakup thing, but I ended with the reading with Brant, and I went home. My son's in the driveway, just pulled up with his pickup truck. And I thought he was going to kind of like, Mom, really? And I said, look, I had this reading, and this is what he calls her Mama.
Yeah.
Mama was saying, and he turned like a pale white, and he walked me over to his pickup truck, and he opened the door, and there was a quarter stuck right here. And he was like, look, I even left it there. So it was amazing. And it was a tiny piece of information that I wouldn't have known about. No one
Right.
else would have known about, but Trevor knew.
Right.
And so, you know, little things like that can mean a lot.
Oh, definitely.
You know?
And then that's why we have to be very careful about some of the words we say sometimes. And I know if I'm misinterpreting what Spirit is trying to tell me.
Which we can, because we're only human.
We're only human, and it's, you know, for example, you said an apple. A symbol for an apple for you might be completely different as a symbol for something for me.
Exactly.
Just like I think one of our teachers, they say a penguin represents a priest or a nun for them. And I'm like, a penguin's a penguin for me. You know?
I just think of someplace cold. So
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and so that's why it's nice when we get a symbol. You know, what does this symbol mean to you?
Right.
And yeah. So getting back to the healing work.
Yes.
You know, it's not just healing for me or for someone out there to get a reading and receive the healing. If you have someone in heaven that really just wants to make amends, say I'm sorry, you know, they are a little different than their earthly people here.
They
They
learn-
don't have, right? They have
they
a bigger
learn.
picture of everything. They've had this life review. Maybe here they had an addiction to alcohol or drugs, and spirit wasn't able to get through to them the way
Right.
they could have, and they want to say they're sorry. Well, that healing gets sent up to heaven too. Their soul can expand and go on. It's so healing for someone to be able to come through and say to the person sitting in front of us that they're sorry.
Right.
I don't know if you experienced that.
I did.
I seem to
I
a
did.
lot.
I had a reading this past weekend where the father came through, and I had great evidence, but his daughter wasn't quite ready to forgive him because there was a lot
And
of
that
pain.
happens.
But it's, you know, it shows that the spirit's there and they're willing to try. So if you have somebody that's actually
they're definitely
you've lost,
trying.
they're trying.
They're trying so hard to get messages
Right,
to you.
and it's going to take time. It takes time. Sometimes forgiveness takes time. So if you don't get a message, or if you go see a medium, you don't quite hear what you were hoping to hear, it doesn't mean that they either didn't want to show up, or that they didn't want to talk to you, or that you didn't hear what you wanted to. It just might not have been the right time. So if you don't get get the answers that you're kind of hoping for, see a different medium, or try at a different time, because sometimes it's just a matter of even being ready to receive. Not everyone's always ready to receive.
And we should tell you that every medium receives different information in a different way. You know, just because, you know, what's ever in our database, what
Right.
we've lived, our life experiences, what I might recall being a little older, like a lot of times Spirit will show me Leave It to Beaver things or something, and I'll know what they're talking about, and this guy might not know about Leave It to Beaver. See, he's
Oh, I
going,
know
"What's
who
that?"
Leave It to Beaver it is, but it was never my favorite show. It was more
it's
The
whatever
Bewitched.
they can come through and make us understand for you. So that's why it's wonderful to find, you know, different people that you can work with and get a message, you know.
Right.
But I know that we do this for healing work to help people on the earth and in heaven, I always say.
Definitely. Do you
Yeah.
use any tools sometimes when you're trying to connect with spirit or with any messages?
Yeah, so I do. I started out a while ago working with a deck of angel cards for me. I found the angels could talk back, and I knew who they were, and I can see them, and they would come and give me messages. And so I have a deck of angel cards here. And it's so wonderful how I started out. Just it's a tool, right, to build that intuitive muscle that we all have inside of us. So
Yes.
there's all different kinds of tools that you can use. Mine was the angel cards because I connected to the angels. I could actually hear Michael and Raphael talking in my ear. So Michael helps me do the cards whenever I do them, and I'll be shuffling, and at first I'd be like, talking to him going, which one, because you want to make sure and get the right card, right? And he'd say, on your thumb, Bonnie, on your thumb, and I'd stop, and I'd know that was the
Yeah.
card. Yeah, now it goes a little bit smoother because I'm used to
Right.
pulling the cards, and then intuitively, right? You want to do the cards, but then intuitively you want to try to listen to see what they want you to know. So it's kind of combining, but actually starting with a tool.
Yep.
And Brant, what do you like for a tool?
I actually
What
use
do you prefer?
I use the traditional tarot cards.
The Rider-Waite.
The Rider-Waite, the Radiant ones. I use this more for psychic work, not really connecting to
Right.
medium and spirit work, though.
Right.
But sometimes when you're looking, or somebody, your client's looking for guidance, sometimes they don't have a departed one, but they're still looking for a healing and some guidance. And the cards are great for that because you let them choose the cards. It's using their energy, and then you're interpreting what the universe is telling you.
See. So Brant does it a little bit different than me, but that's okay. That's great. That's great, actually. And what we should talk about is the difference between being a medium and a psychic, or a psychic medium, like
Yes.
the two different modalities.
Yes.
And then how, do you want to tell them?
Sure. You know, there's an old saying we kind of have, and I'm sure you're very familiar with it. All mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are medium. And a lot of people are like, well, what's that mean, and what's the difference? When we're tuning in psychic, we're actually tuning into your energy. It's a lot of times it's pushing the energy in our auras together, or working with our client, and we're pushing it forward. We also have the ability, to some extent, see within a range of time, because time in the spirit world is all just a matter of being differential. We're very linear, being on Earth, because we can't see at some at a point. Bonnie and I, where we have our abilities, we have the ability to kind of see a little bit. Now, everybody has free will, and that's a really key, important fact. There are certain life lessons that we're actually given that we actually can't really deviate from. If there's something you're supposed to learn, if you try to get around it, it's going to come back to you. And sometimes it comes back to you even more blatant in the face, or even as a
Exactly. And
stronger trial.
if you don't learn a lesson that's coming at you, you're just going to keep getting the
getting
same
it.
lesson. I
Getting
tell
it.
my clients that all the time. If you have a trial or tribulation coming at you, and you ask yourself why, what you want to say is, oh, what could I learn from this? What
Right.
lesson could I learn from this? And if you look at it a little bit differently, and then you learn the lesson, then it can go away.
Right.
But I'm getting you off from the difference
No.
between a medium and a psychic. So go
No,
ahead.
no worries. So with a medium, we're actually connecting with spirit. So instead of directing our energy forward or backwards to feel in time, we're directing it up. And by directing it up, it helps us to connect with heaven and with the spirit realm in order for us to connect. It's a blending of energies, and they step into our aura. Sometimes we'll see things. They'll actually show us things. We might actually hear, and other times we might just actually feel. For me, it's kind of like looking out a window, and as you look out that window, you see that reflection back.
And yours was different than mine.
It's different than yours, because mine's very transparent, although sometimes I have seen almost physically. I remember being in class one time, and there was this girl, Jen, in front of me, and I said, there's a Chinese woman like over your shoulder with gray hair and a bun. And she's like, oh, that's my guide. She's with me all the time. And I'm like, wow. But then when somebody else sees what you're seeing, that's like mind-blowing, because that gives you a lot of validation. You're not losing your mind, because it's a fine line some days. There's a very fine line between psychic and psychosis. It's funny, and we walk that line very closely sometimes. For me, hearing is like being in a restaurant. There's a whole bunch of conversations, because again, spirit are people, and spirit does talk. So we might overhear another conversation going that might not be directed necessarily to our clients, because they're having a communication themselves. I don't know, how does it work for you?
So neither way is right or wrong.
Right.
We both get our messages. Maybe they say, hey, Bonnie, we got to be really plain and simple with her, because I can see them like I'm looking at you now,
Yep.
and I can hear them like we're having a conversation. Like I talk back to them all the time. Well, what's that?
Right.
And it is very clear. But you get great messages too. So it's just a different way of
Right.
taking in information. And then of course, so we have clairvoyant, seeing, clairaudient, hearing, and then clairsentience is the feeling in your
Yep.
solar plexus. So as long as we're out there and we're getting a great message to the person, it's great. But different mediums see, hear, and feel in different ways. But being a medium means that we can actually have a conversation with someone that is in heaven.
Yes.
And being a psychic means, go ahead, Brant, you can tell them the psychic
Well,
part.
being a psychic means is that we're able to tune into the earthly and auric energies. It's less spirit and more physical earth, I guess you could say.
What I have to do with
energetic.
the psychic stuff, though, is I go into the aura, but then I also connect to the divine. So they're guides or God, Jesus, the angels, whoever wants to give me some guidance for the person sitting in front of me.
Right.
So I do that too.
I tune into the universe for
Okay.
those types of things, for some certain decisions,
See,
and that's where I use
mediums
the
work different,
Right.
but yeah,
Right.
but it's all good.
right.
all
It's
good.
you know, we all have different types of decks. This is the Lenormand deck, and this is a very in-your-face deck. Like the tarot cards tend to show more of a story, like the Magician. It says that you have all the tools you need. Whereas if in this there's an anchor, and I was actually doing a reading for a client this past weekend, and he was actually trying to decide whether he goes to college or he goes into the Navy, and I pulled the anchor.
Navy.
And that's where his heart was, because that's where his grandfather was actually in the Navy. I guess he was in World War II. And he wanted to follow in his grandfather's footsteps.
Oh,
So,
and see, that's a piece of guidance that was given to you psychically.
Yeah.
That's very important. So both are very, very important tools to be able to use.
definitely. Do you use any other tools?
So I want to tell you about this. This is my column this week in the Sentinel and Enterprise. It's always in the lifestyle page, and it says, "Is the future your cup of tea?" Well, my grandmother used to read tea leaves readings, and I've never done it. I've had a little class, but I just started, and it's amazing. And it's something that everybody can do at home, and there's some directions in the column, so they could cut this out and sit with a cup of tea and get their own reading, because this is, again, just another way, a tool
Yeah.
to get a reading for yourself, right?
Right.
So we're talking about these tools today because we want you to be able to connect with spirit too. So getting a deck of tarot cards for yourself or a deck of angel cards for yourself, and just really, they all come with books and tell
Yeah.
you how and everything, and just to become one with spirit a little bit more helps our journey here for us
Yes.
on earth, because when you are connected, it just makes it easier here for us. And they're giving me the signal that, geez, Brant, our time is up for
Already?
today. I know, we
It feels like we've
enjoyed
only been
it
here for
so
5
much.
minutes.
Brant, tell our audience out there how they can get in touch with you.
Perfect. Well, on Friday, October 27th, I will be at Central Mass Serenity. I will be with the amazing Nancy Smith. Nancy is a spirit artist, so she actually draws while we communicate. So you might actually be one of the lucky people in the audience to get a picture of your spirit loved one while we give you a message. You can also find me on the web at www.brant, BRANT, and I can also be found on Facebook, Twitter, and you can always give me a call at 978-391-9779.
See, we're everywhere, but we're
everywhere.
here for you. We really are. It's we love doing this from the bottom of our heart. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Brant.
Thank you, Bonnie.
We'll be back with Brant again.
It was
Okay.
a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Excellent.
It's wonderful having you. And we're cut off. Robert kept coming, but.